This video is to reintroduce you to Roman housing. We've looked a bit at this in our Roman social life topic, but before we learn about some examples of houses in Pompeii, I want to go over them in a bit more depth. So the Romans lived in three main types of houses. The first is the domus, which is a townhouse, and this is the one that we're going to look at in more detail. You'll remember that they also lived often in the cities in an insula or apartment block, and then there were also big country homes known as the villa that were often located outside of these main centres, and they'd be more like a mansion in today's terms. So firstly, looking at the main aspects of a domus, they're quite a bit different to houses that we live in modern New Zealand. And an important first difference is that the house faces inwards around a central courtyard, that you don't tend to look out, you tend to look in. And so all the windows are internal, looking into this internal courtyard and internal garden, whereas we quite often will have windows facing outwards to take advantage of our natural surroundings. Symmetry is really, really important. In Roman homes, they tend to be a lot more symmetrical than modern homes. And so during our lesson, we're going to talk about why these differences might exist. So here is a diagram that you can find on Wikimedia Commons, which nicely shows you what a Roman house looked like. So at the top we've got a sort of 3D model of it, and at the bottom we have the floor plan of a typical domus. So you would enter at point 1, going through the falces or vestibulum, which is like a little narrow entranceway, into the atrium, which is number 5 in your diagram. That's the main room. And then you would continue through the tablinum, which is number 8, it's sort of a study room, and you'd head into the garden, which is 14. You'd quite often also have these pools for rainwater, numbers 7 and 15. So one is more a decorative pool for rainwater, the one at the back might be a fish pond. And so as you can imagine, if you're looking through from point 1, there's an unbroken view from the front door right through the house down to the back garden, so you could actually see the garden from the front street. Here's a bit more detail of this diagram. So the houses that we're going to look at aren't exactly the same as this, but they follow the same kind of diagram. So as you can see, the rooms are quite small. Number 11 is often a bedroom, and these are much tinier than ours. You tended to live outside in the main areas like the atrium and the back garden. So the atrium is the main reception area where your clients and visitors would come, as well as your friends. And in the time before electricity, they needed lighting, and they got that often from natural lighting. So this was provided through the compluvium. This is the hole in the roof that lets rainwater in, and that rainwater will fall and be collected in the impluvium, which is that pool in the middle. And then you'd have a paved area around that you could walk around and hang out in. It was the main room in the house, and so it was used for a variety of different things. It could be kind of a waiting and reception area, but after the eruption of Vesuvius, some of them were found with looms in them for spinning, so the women of the house might set up there and do their weaving there for the day. And it was also an important place because it was where the lararium was located. So this was the little shrine that contained the lares, so the household gods, like this figure here in the picture. And it also contained the busts of the important ancestors of the family. Continuing on through the house, so the tablinum was that kind of room that linked the atrium with the peristylium, the back garden. It was sort of had 2 walls and was open on the front and back sides, but it could also be closed off with curtains, and it was used as a study or reception room, often for the master of the house, and where he might have his clients come and speak to him. But as we'll see when we look at the development of the domus, some of its previous functions included being the main room itself, or it could have also been a dining room or a bedroom. Dining rooms in Latin, the word for dining room is triclinium, which means 3 couches, and that's because the Romans ate on couches and there were usually 3 of them in a dining room. So these were located in various positions throughout the house. Many homes had more than one dining room, and their use depended on the weather. So during the warmer months, you would go to the exedra, which is the summer dining room. This would be located right next door to the garden, so that you can look out onto the garden and see the beautiful views. You'd also have a winter triclinium, which would be kind of further into the centre of the house with more walls, so it wasn't quite so drafty in the cold weather. Some homes also had a caenaculum, which is a small dining room often found upstairs, and poorer families wouldn't eat on couches, but they'd actually sit at tables. The culina is the Latin word for kitchen. Initially, this would have been a simple fire wherever they had space for it, and quite often there would be, they wouldn't be a sort of set kitchen like we have now, but a temporary kind of makeshift arrangement that moved depending on the need. They, in more established homes, would have some sort of sink area to be able to pour water into, and an oven that would be heated and fueled using wood or charcoal. There'd be a hole left in the roof for the smoke to go out of, but these were often quite dark and dingy spaces because the people who worked in them were the slaves rather than the master or the mistress of the home. Without electricity, heating, lighting and water was somewhat more complex for the Romans. They would use braziers for heating indoors, which is sort of like a small portable indoor fireplace. We still use them today, although often outside. And they would use their window panes and curtains and blinds to try and provide some sort of insulation from the cold. Candles and lighting lanterns were used to provide artificial light, but this was quite expensive, and so you tended to live from sun up to sundown. However, rich Romans had access to running water via the aqueducts, and they even had fountains in their homes. And here you can see some examples of little oil lamps that the Romans would use for light. So you wouldn't really want to be living by this because it's not very strong, but in terms of a little bit of light to see your way around, and they've got cute little decorations on them. I like the animal one there. The final important part of a Roman house is the hortus or garden, and so we find gardens present in even the oldest and poorest of Roman homes. The idea of a peristylium developed with the influence of ancient Greece. So this was a garden often with fountains in it that was surrounded by a row of columns. The plants in there weren't just for looking pretty. There would be, for example, often fruit trees, and then the rooms would face into that area to get fresh air and light. So those are the basic bits of a Roman house. What I want you to do when you come to class is bring in a question you have. So something you're not sure about, something you're wondering, or something you want to get the other's opinion about, and we can talk about it in class. See you there.